हाँ बस वो करारे करते रहो।
Please turn off audio, everyone.
Good evening to everyone. Now, in between us, Samarth Chaddha sir has arrived, who is studying for the bar exam and also have the experience as LLM student in the US. A warm welcome to you, sir. Without wasting a single second, giving him mic to the sir for addressing us in the today's session. Mic is all yours, sir.
Hi everybody. Hi Nikhil, how are you?
Fine, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I just joined. So if you can just let me know how you'd like to get started.
Fine, sir. We just did your welcome speech. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You want me to give a welcome speech?
No, no, sir. We already did it. Sir,
Okay, okay,
please start with your question.
okay. All right. Sure. So all right. Yeah, so actually I'll just give a you probably know I've done my LLM from NYU. I also run this small admissions portal called LLM Guru. We're pretty active on Instagram and LinkedIn, and we often post bios of people who have completed the LLM successfully, and also law students around the world that may have something useful to offer. So maybe I'll start off with typically why people get the LLM. What is some of the eligibility criteria in terms of universities, and then I'll talk about CVs and LORs and those sorts of things. So typically, people do consider getting an LLM because they want to specialize in an area of law, or they feel that perhaps they want to spend a year outside. In this case, most people, I'm guessing everybody here is from India, so people want to spend a year outside where they can enjoy that experience, also do some learning in the process, and maybe some people that are looking to get into academia, they want to research under a particular professor and build a and some publications and some expertise in that respect. So there are various reasons to why people do the LLM. I think the first step is really to ask yourself what is the reason why you'd like to go, because all said and done, it is a lot of money and a lot of time and investment. But at the same time, don't be very shortchanged in your approach. Sorry, don't be very myopic in your approach. Don't shortchange your approach. Where um, you don't want to necessarily look at an LLM only because you feel it will help you get a job. Because what happens is you have a career that is easily 25, 30 years from the point at which you will finish your LLM. So sorry, you need to get a degree that is um, that keeps that horizon in mind. So many people, when they ask me, oh, I want to do this LLM because I feel that I'll get into a top law firm, or I'll get into some sort of international firm. I think could you mute the others? Otherwise I feel people might not be able to hear what I'm saying. Nikhil, could you host mute the others?
Please turn off your audio, everyone.
You have the ability to mute the
Yes,
others.
yes,
So
definitely. I'm doing that. So.
yeah.
चलिए वो करेंगे
Mute.
और या दुतिया मुतिया चिपिया या काय ढंग से
Please
Actually,
mute this Piyush.
host has the option to mute. Kindly mute it.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's about it. Yeah, we've got everyone covered. Okay, great. So yeah, so you need to think about your reason. That's very important. Then once you have your reason in mind, it becomes a lot easier to look at which country you're looking at. So typically, the US will look at a very holistic sense of what you have done, what are the extracurriculars that you worked on, what is your SOP talking about. If you have some work experience, then they will also look at what sort of work experience you have. The UK tends to be a little more focused on the grades that you have. Like if you go to some of the top universities, like you have Oxford and Cambridge, they tend to be very, very like driven as to what rank you have, and what has been your what has been like your cumulative CGPA? Is it high enough? So if you're looking and you're targeting some of those top universities, you might want to ensure that you are at least in the top three before you graduate. Even with that, I'll be honest, on a personal note, I was not successful in obtaining admission into either of Cambridge or Oxford, despite having I was second in my law school class. So it's very competitive, but that doesn't mean that that is a sure shot thing. There are people who may not have been second, and because they still had a good profile or something that these Oxford and Cambridge were looking for, they were willing to the universities were willing to offer admission to them. So yeah, start with why you want to do the degree, then decide which country you want to look at. One easy way is to filter by location. So you can, I think you'll have to mute him as well. Okay, thank you. So one way to look at is filter by location, filter by professor. You can also filter by rank. Uh, Sorry, I think you'll have to mute Palak again. Yeah, thanks. So each time you use these different criteria, it will become much easier for you to decide. Okay, how do I build my list? So typically you'll see that building your list takes, I mean, you might have like 15, 20 universities. That will be a lot for you to do in terms of applying. So you should probably reduce that to maybe 10 to 12 or 12 to 15 at the most, because it's you'll be writing personal statements and tracking all these deadlines for all of them. So it can get a little difficult trying to manage all of that in such a short frame of time. Then so you have started with your question, you know what you want to study, you know where you want to go, you have now you're coming to some semblance of building your list in terms of the universities that you want to apply to. And then the next question comes is, okay, when do I apply? That, when is the time frame usually for these things? Now, unfortunately, due to the current times that we are in because of COVID, there is not that much clarity as to whether the deadlines will change. But if you go by what we have been doing in the past, usually August to December is what we call the business end of things, where people are looking at universities, shortlisting them, writing their SOPs and their application materials, and they're using that time to apply for these various LLM programs that are available. So it sounds like it's a lot of time, but actually it's not. It can be very, very. It can pass by very quickly. So if you're maybe in a sense, if you can get a head start and work on some of these things before August, that is preferable, because you have more time to work on these things. Because let's face it, even if you're applying to 10 universities, that could mean writing 10 personal statements, and all these things take time. So the more time you have, and also you'll have to balance it with your other commitments. They may be law school commitments. If you're working somewhere, they may be, you're trying to work and apply at the same time. So the more time you have, the better it is. In terms of eligibility criteria, there is, as I said, some of those top UK universities, they have like very strict criteria as to ranking and in terms of grades and everything. But in terms of others, it's more open-ended. They will look at your extracurriculars. They will look at your, the rest of the CV that you have in terms of your internships. And so the most other universities are more holistic in nature. So one concern that I think a lot of students have is that I haven't had that many good grades in law school. So would I be able to get into any LLM program? The answer is yes. You will still be able to get into an LLM program, even if you don't have like super stellar grades, or you want like a class topper, because there is an LLM program for everybody. It just depends on, maybe you feel, okay, I shouldn't apply to just all the top colleges. I can also apply to some universities that are maybe ranked outside the top cohort of law schools, that are just good enough. So for example, in the US, if you're looking at the top 14 law schools, you could apply to a university like UCLA, or you could apply to a university like Vanderbilt or Emory, which are all really, really good universities, in their own. They just don't happen to be in the top 14, but they're like maybe 16, 17, 18. So it doesn't mean that you're not going to a good, well-known university. It's just that, yeah, maybe you were perhaps not as, you didn't have as high grades as you could have gotten in your law school career, and now but you still want to go, and you still want to study and invest in yourself. So therefore you can still apply. There are LLM programs available for everyone, and that would actually be very happy to have students from India, where they might even offer you a scholarship. So don't worry, if you haven't quite sort of hit it out of the park in law school. You get one more chance, and it doesn't end there, because some of these systems are also more, as I said, more holistic. They're not like so focused on the, like how we are in India. We're very focused on the grading system. So they, once you go for the LLM program, then you'll realize, oh, okay, not everybody is like competing with each other and sort of at each other's throats, when it's actually more chilled out. So yeah, I think that's so hopefully I've answered that point about eligibility criteria that a lot of people have in their minds. Maybe it'll be helpful to talk about some of the application components, and how do you go about them. So typically the easiest thing to start off with is your CV, because CV is something that we've been working on for typically the first year, or if you're in the 3-year program, it's you've been working on it for like the last 2 years, or last 4 years if you're in the BA LLB program. So CV is something that we are used to seeing. We keep working on it, so that's the easiest thing to sort of start off with. And typically don't make it very long. In India we do a lot of legal internships, so sometimes it can be a little tempting to have a CV that's running into like 4 or 5 pages, but that's really not going to bode well with the admissions committees. You need to keep it to 2 pages. In fact, when you're in the US, they will not take your CV if it's less than or if it's like more than 1 page. So 1 to 2 pages is sort of the ideal length. It can be a little difficult because we have to chisel and chop some of the internships that we have, and maybe restrict them to only one bullet point. But if that's what it takes, make sure you don't have a 4 or 5 page CV. Keep it to a max of 2 pages. Talk about some of your continuing education. So if you've taken any courses with some of these companies like LawSeco, Coursera, or Enhelian, those are very good. If you've done any work with respect to research or drafting, or even doing some pro bono work, if you've done any representation, those are very, very helpful experiences to highlight. And if you were the editor for your law school journal, or if you have been an avid mooter, then what I see is a lot of people mention the moot and that's it. They just say, whereas they may have even won the moot, or they may have gone to the semifinals. Mention that you have actually, you what role you had. So if you were a researcher, or were you one of the oral, like were you into oral advocacy, and what point at which you, if it was prestigious, you went to the semifinals, or you went to the finals, then mention that. Because you just need to give enough context that somebody seeing your CV, they can pick on those things. Because what will happen is, especially there are interviews as well for some universities, where they will actually keep your CV, and then they'll ask you about that. They'll be like, hey, could you tell me about this experience? Or like in my case, I remember one of the universities actually asked me, oh, you've done a lot of different internships, like you've done one at a trial court, you've done one in arbitration, you've done one at a firm. I was in the 3-year program, so I said, yeah, I have done all of this because I don't have a lot of time. I only have 2 years because I'm in the 3-year program. So I need to try different environments to see what I like, because otherwise, I may just end up doing one thing over and over again. And then it's just that much harder to realize. Sorry, could you mute somebody again? I think it's Ankit. Could you mute him? Might be sort of speaking. Yeah. So it's a little. Your CV will definitely get noticed. It will get picked on in interviews where you'll have questions people will ask. And also your CV is something that you may need later in order to refine, and it sort of forms that first impression, really, if you so to speak, in terms of your applications. So definitely keep it as brief as you can, as concise, and make the document work for you rather than it weighing you down in a sense. So have it, make sure it's very crisp, and it's well formatted, and you don't have mistakes, and you have kept all of your experiences, but not in a sense all of them, but like at least the ones that are the most important, or the most helpful in terms of bringing out your law school personality. So yeah, that's the CV. Then the next thing that you can start working on, which I've referred to earlier, is your personal statement. Typically, the universities in the UK will have, some of them will have like certain detailed questions that they want to see. So they'll give you a suggested word limit. They'll say like this is 1,000 to 1,500 words, and you need to. So don't exceed that. Don't write like pages and pages of your life. As interesting and fun as it is, if they've mentioned a word limit, do stick to that, because part of this is you showing that you can follow instructions, and you can also deliver as to the the deadline that they have given. So do that. Stick to the word limit and answer all of those questions that they're actually looking for. So they might want you to talk about your research plans, or they might want you to talk about the courses that that you want to take. So mention all of those. Don't have that clear. Also make it more like a story. So, for example, it has to flow in a sense that uh, when somebody is reading, it doesn't feel disjointed. Like maybe one paragraph you're talking about some internship that you did, now suddenly you're talking about why you would make a very good student at King's or NYU, or so make sure you have some. One very easy way to do this is make sure the last sentence of your paragraph is transitioning well with the first sentence of that next paragraph. So let's say you have two paragraphs. Your last sentence and your first sentence should um, have some sort of a sense of flow where the writing feels like it is a narrative or a story, but at the same time you're also getting your those points ticked off in terms of what the SOP requires or SOP wants. So that apart from the UK universities, there are a few, like the ones in the US or other countries where things are more flexible, where you don't necessarily have to. Yeah, you can write about your story. Maybe you can even write up to a little more than 1,500 words, where things are more flexible. I know one example because it's NYU. They actually have a very small SOP. It's only like I think 500 words, and it can be very challenging to present a best case as to why you want to go for this particular LLM. So maybe what you can do is you can write your other SOPs first, which are longer, because it's easier to write something that's longer, and then you can work on something that is shorter in a sense, because you can then use that for because you already have your ideas in like a different document, and then it's much easier to take something from there and then write like 500 words out of that. That's actually the approach that we do at LLM Guru, because whenever a student comes in and I have them like, okay, I'm like, okay, why don't you write the longer one first, because it's much easier to express yourself and then create a shorter version. So if you need help with your SOPs, do reach out. I'll put an email or something in the description box later, so you can, if you're having trouble writing some of these things, you might hit like writer's block, and you're because it's surprisingly, it's actually hard to write about your own life. It's actually easy to write about somebody else's, or if you're describing some celebrity, but when you get down to writing your own stuff, even though you have so much material in your head, converting it from your head to paper can be it can be a little challenging, but perhaps that's why we have LLM advisors and people offering these services, because it's easier when it's someone else's life. So yeah, I think the just one final point on the SOP is, think of it as a substitute for your face-to-face interview. So anything that you wouldn't do in an interview, probably don't do that in your SOP. So keep it, it's informal yet formal, where you have to be, where you have to still keep the rules of an interview in mind. So don't get over emotional, or, start because this habit of perhaps writing on, a lot of quotes that, oh, I was motivated or inspired by these quotes, unless you're doing the due diligence and justice in terms of justifying why that quote is important, and why is it led to your pursuing law or wanting to pursue further studies. Using a quote is not very helpful, because people will realize that you are just figuring out a way to build, like, use space, because you have 1,500 words or 2,000 words, and you are putting in a quote so that your word count will will increase. uh, don't do any of these cheeky tricks. If you really use a quote, make sure you have explained and referenced it very well. I had a client that actually got into some of the Mahabharat and Ramayana and all that stuff. I mean, people outside India might not get some of those cultural references. So keep your language very neutral, keep it very universal in nature. Don't just don't necessarily get into cultural specifics or cultural references, which people outside India may not necessarily be able to follow so easily. So don't go too crazy with the SOP. Just keep some broad guidelines in mind. If you're doing it on your own, definitely use the spell check function on Word, and also there are tools like Grammarly and some online editors available for free. So definitely make sure if for before you send it to university, you've at least done some basic punctuation, and you've done some basic proofreading. What I usually find helpful is I read the material, like the SOP, out loudly, so that if I'm reading, sometimes when you're when you're writing these things, it can be a little different from when you actually hear them. So it's helpful to read some of these out loudly, and you might have to go through multiple drafts. It can be quite painful, but sometimes people have even written. In fact, one of the people that we have on the blog, she's a student from Turkey, and she got into Harvard, and she said that I wrote 17 versions of my personal statement, and I think on the 18th one, or maybe she wrote like 16, and on the 17th one she finally hit the right the sort of the right note for the SOP. So yeah, patience is important. That's why I said, when you're starting to work from August to December, don't think that I can delay this till like right till the end, till November. The more time you have, the better it will be in a sense. So yeah, CVs, SOPs, and then there's also LORs, which are important, letters of recommendation. So you should choose somebody who can literally go on a rooftop and say, oh, this is the best person I have worked with, or I have tutored, or I have mentored. This is, and so somebody who is a professor should have at least taught you. That is very important. Sometimes people have, they contact me and they ask me that should I take a letter of recommendation from this professor, and I ask them, have they taught you, and they say no. And I'm like, well, then that's not going to be very useful for you, because the university outside is not going to look at the fact that they are the vice chancellor, or the fact that they are just I mean, somebody very highly ranked in your university. They will look at, okay, has this professor actually taught you? Can this professor testify to your academic acumen, or can they testify to your research skills, or perhaps your work ethic, or something tangible that the letter of recommendation will have to bring out. So if the professor hasn't taught you, even if they're the vice chancellor or somebody you think they're very influential, don't waste your time. And it's a missed opportunity if you get that kind of letter of recommendation from somebody like that, because somebody that taught you, somebody that actually saw you grow as a student in the capacity of a semester or 2 semesters, would actually have a lot more to offer. So definitely seek out those people, even if they don't have necessarily the highest rank. Or sometimes I had LORs from people who were just LLM graduates, but they were, we had this designation called as research associate, or they would become an RA for a year before they became like a full-time associate professor. So I didn't care so much about those ranks. I went more for the content. And actually, it's, you keep hearing this phrase, right? Content is king. It's the same thing for LORs. They have to be rich with a lot of content, where and preferably some examples that are specific to your actual experience. Because what happens is, a lot of these professors, and actually at LLM Guru, what I do is, if I have to write the LOR for somebody, I write it from scratch. Because what happens is, I know what happens on the other side, with some of the faculty members. They're very busy, they don't have time, so they just have one generic template that they probably created a year or two ago, and all they do is they just change your name, they put it in, and they send it to you. So some of these faculty, of course there are exceptions available everywhere, but faculty generated LORs may not be as useful, because again, it's a missed opportunity. You can actually put in a lot more detail. And that's why perhaps working with a service provider, or working with somebody who is doing this on a regular basis, is much more helpful. Because if a strong LOR can be a very, very good value add for your application. So yeah, I think I'll just briefly I'll conclude with maybe some thoughts on scholarships and costs and funding and those sorts of things. Yeah, the whole thing with scholarships is that in the UK there are a lot of these external scholarships like in-lax scholarships, or there are a lot of these. Like if you go to Cambridge's website, you will see even based on which state you are coming from, or where if like you have an interest in intellectual property, you have scholarships. So UK is very different from the US. Typically, in my experience, the universities themselves give very handsome amounts of scholarships. So let's say your degree costs like $60,000, you might even be able to get like $25,000 or $30,000 or even $40,000 in some cases from universities. So 60, at least 50% scholarship you can get in the US from the university itself. That might require you to have very strong application materials, and also require you to maybe take a university that's not ranked so highly, because they will be the ones that will be more willing to give money. But there's no hard and fast here. I mean, you could have even a university like a University of Pennsylvania, which is like extremely, which is an Ivy League, has Wharton Business School, and has a very good rank in terms of law schools as well, also offer you money. In fact, on their website they mentioned that they offer scholarships from 5,000 to all the way up to 40,000. So the whole rank versus scholarship money is important, but it's not a hard and fast, because you can even have a very top school that gives you money as well. um, yeah, I think sorry, could you mute? I think a few people have come back on this thing. Yeah. So scholarships can be slightly it might be a game where you have to wait and watch, because at the point at which you are submitting your applications, you may not know how much scholarship you'll get, and so there's some uncertainty in that regard. But you have to play the waiting game. You have to, like, when you're submitting your materials around November, December, you might have to wait about January or February, or at least March, even in some cases, to hear back whether you're going to get a scholarship or not. I remember one interview that I had with one law school. Right at the end of the interview, they actually offered a pretty decent scholarship. Like, it was $25,000, and at that time the cost was 50,000. So that was like a 50% scholarship that they offered. So that they communicated that right at the end of the admissions interview. So there, there's some mixed approaches. I remember there was one other university that sent an email and said that, you have been successful with your admission, and we'd also like to offer you, an X amount of scholarship. So various approaches. Of course, one would love to find out as soon as possible, so that you have clarity on finances and those sorts of things. But sometimes that's not always possible because of the approach the university adopts. The LLM can be a very expensive affair. So if you're not able to get a scholarship, but you really want to go, there are some companies that offer a loan as well. I also, in my personal capacity, took out a student loan because it wasn't possible to put all that, or perhaps it wasn't fair to put that burden entirely on my family. Also, living in New York is can be an expensive affair. So there are some companies called like Prodigy Finance and Empower Financing that offer students non-collateral based loans. So you can look at those as well. In an Indian context, I think Credila offers, which is the loan wing of HDFC. They also offer some loans as well. These companies haven't sponsored me or given me anything. So in case you're wondering, is this guy paid by any of these? I'm not. I'm just mentioning them because they are, they're options that you can consider and you can use when you're thinking about going. So yeah, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have. If I've missed anything, Nikhil, please let me know, and I can circle back and talk about it. Okay, there is a question actually. All right. So there have been a lot of debates about LLM abroad and LLM India, and I'm a first generation law student. So I had a lot of confusion as I could not get any credible information regarding how to proceed for LLM abroad, and I got lost with all the info. So I decided to go for prep with India as I was scared that otherwise I will end up with nothing as approach for both is different. So I kind of decided to pursue LLM from India and do some course from abroad so that I have better insight. Please share your thoughts. See, an LLM from India is if you are doing it for whatever reason, perhaps cost, or perhaps you feel that you weren't guided well enough to go outside. If it's a question of guidance, I offer that as a as part of LLM Guru. So I'll just put the website, and you can follow and reach out to me if you feel that you need that kind of professional help and guidance. So happy to guide you if you want to even consider applying for next year or in the future. If you are doing your LLM from India, I would just say try to do it perhaps with from a good university which has good professors, because part of the LLM is to really challenge yourself as a professional. And because you already have a degree, right? You are already a lawyer, so in a sense you don't need to do the LLM, right? You can, based on your law degree, you can go to a court, you can argue, you can work for a law firm. So the LLM has to be a very strong value add for your career. And if you do it in India also, make sure that that degree is really adding some value. Don't just get it because you feel you want to add that, I am a BA, LLB, LLM. That's useless. Make sure you are able to have some sort of tangible value in terms of your skills, or how you changed as a professional. So you might want to analyze that, okay, whichever program I'm doing even domestically is still giving me that value add and is still helping me to push myself in a way that I can justify later on, if like I am asked this question in an interview, or even if I want to reflect 15, 20 years down the line. I don't feel like I just wasted my year because this is something that I felt at the time would be a great idea. So if you feel the Indian degree can do that, then by all means, go ahead and look at that. But if you feel it somewhere you're not enjoying it, or you feel like you really want to go outside, and that would have been the best state of affairs, then perhaps you can get in touch with someone like me, and I'd be happy to at least tell you what your options are in terms of where you'd like to go. So, okay, that was that. All right, could you please throw some light on LLM procedures and options in Canada? Sure. So, Canada has, they don't have as many law schools as the US. So they have maybe like about 7 or 8 that are like really good. There's Toronto, University of Toronto, there's Osgood, there's University of British Columbia, or the Peter Allard School of Law on the West Coast. So you've got these three that are sort of the top guys, and then you've got a few other good ones as well. You've got Queens is there, University of Ottawa, Dalhousie. So these are all the LLM programs that people do target. One thing in terms of the Canadian option is that you can actually go there and use that to become a permanent resident. So it's much easier as compared to like the UK, where you might just work for 2 years, or in the US where you get like a 1 year period. Here you can actually have a much longer stint, because you can go as a student, then get your student permit converted to a work permit, and then from a work permit you can actually become a permanent resident of Canada, which is a pretty good option. If you ask me, I think it's very, it's very promising. They are right now things are a little slow because of COVID. They're only taking people that are in Canada in terms of their immigration system. But if the LLM can be a stepping stone to perhaps becoming a Canadian citizen or a Canadian permanent resident, then you should look at it from that perspective. They have a slightly longer process in terms of becoming a lawyer as compared to some of the other countries, because they require you to also do an articling position for 10 months. you are also required to give a set of exams, like there are two bar exams. And so it can be a slightly longer process as compared to like the US, where you just go for 2 days, you give a bar exam, and you have a few other components, but I think they're much easier than the Canadian examples. So but still great country, very very pro people coming in and settling down. Even now, when Trump introduced that ban, just a few days ago, Canada was all about, please do come for our, please do come for our like borders, and please come and study and stay here. So, yeah, if you're looking at Canada, also happy to advise you in that regard. Please, do reach out, and then, so I can definitely do that. So we also do have a question about applying for a PR. Yeah, so I mean, we do help with that as well. We do help with PR applications and those sorts of things. So if you want to try your options based on while you're in India, or you want to apply for a PR or an LLM in Canada, we can help you with all of that, whatever option you want to choose in terms of what you want. um, so then we have one more question about placements directly after LLB. Yeah, placements. So it's very wide term, because a placement could mean even working for an individual lawyer, or it could mean working for a like a mid-sized law firm, or even a top law firm. Perhaps you will find that currently the things might be a little slow because of COVID, and hiring might not be as great as it was maybe like in previous years. But if you're, let's say you're a penultimate year law student, and you're thinking about your options, y- it might help you to be more flexible in your approach, because honestly I don't know if the legal market has been hit, how many law firm positions there will be available. So be flexible in your approach. Maybe you can you can work for an individual lawyer, like somebody practicing at the High Court, or even at the Supreme Court, and use that experience, because those people are typically, they're always helpful to have, it's always helpful for them to have a helping hand. So you could start off that way. That will also help you in your skills of learning how to draft and learning how to write. But if you're able to get an interview, or an internship, use an internship to get a position at a law firm, maybe that's what I would suggest, where just ask if you can do an internship for them, and then use that internship to try and impress some of the team members that you have, and push for an opportunity at a law firm that way. So if that helps you, so placement is very broadly defined. You need to decide, okay, where am I going to work, and then accordingly change your strategy. So yeah, hopefully that helps you, in terms of what you asked. Employment in the US after LLM, yeah, there are options available. I was actually just interviewing somebody who had worked at White and Case. So he worked with their like their restructuring team for a year. He graduated from Northwestern, so very good school, like very highly ranked and very well known in the Chicago area. So that's one example. In my own personal capacity, I had a few startups that were interested in my services. I didn't choose to go that option because I wanted to work for a top law firm. So I didn't do that. But now in hindsight, maybe I feel if I would have just done that, even if it was for 6 or 7 months, it would have been very good work experience. Because later, as life has a funny way of working, I actually ended up starting a startup of myself. So I always wondered, hey, 2 years ago, if I had worked at a startup, maybe I would have been, somewhat better in managing my own startup. So yeah, that's one example. Then there's also a lot of entertainment and immigration law firms that tend to want LLMs, and want people who have this expertise that they can offer. So it's just something for you to consider. There's plenty of options that way. So we have another question: does working with an NGO help to build the CV? Yes, it does. Because if you so it depends. If you're planning to work after you graduate full time, like a legal associate, yes, by all means. Because you can, if like they practice some niche area like human rights or environmental law, that becomes your selling point in terms of why you want to pursue that during your LLM as well. If you're doing it more like in an internship kind of format, then I would say yes, maybe you could go for a very well-known NGO, like something that has an international name, so that or at least something that is easy to look up and the mandate is very clear. So your internship should be somebody does an internship at something at the level of like a Greenpeace, or something at the level of Human Rights Law Network, or something in that space that is very well known, and or there's some child rights organization. So make sure you then if it's just 1 month, then you go for like the best possible brand name, so that people are at least aware that yes, this is an NGO, this must be some different experience. And maybe if you worked like WWF, for example, where you're working in a legal team, so people know, okay, conservation, animals, so the mandate should be clear. Hopefully that's helpful for you. So we have another. Okay, they're thanking me. Fine. Yeah. Is this the right time for beginning with the application process for next year? Yes, it is, because August is not that far away. We are almost 29th June now, so June is over for all practical purposes. So you have July, August, and then all the way up till December. So this is a good time to start working on your applications, and start working on whatever materials you might have to write. So definitely I would say yes, do start, because the earlier you do, the better your materials will be. How many courses do I need to qualify for a specialization? So it depends. Like at NYU, if you were taking the international law specialization, then you would need just 8 courses, eight credits actually. So or I think it was 12. Now I forget. So because I didn't do it. So for like corporate law, you had about, I think, a little over 15 or 20. So you had to like figure out how to so the thing is, for the bar you need like 12 credits, and then you need a certain amount depending on your specialization. But don't worry about all that, because that is something that when you get to a university, they will help you figure out in any case. And there'll be course advisors and people who will make sure you are meeting your requirements. So you will definitely be able to figure all that stuff out very well. So, okay, we have a question here. Shouldn't you do an LLM from India, NLUs, or even do you, rather than choosing Vanderbilt, Emory, or UCLA, which will be expensive? Yeah, as I said, the LLM, if you do it from an NLU or even DU, it's great, but you have to keep asking yourself, is it going to add as much value? So even if you go to Vanderbilt, Emory, or UCLA, they might actually offer you some scholarship, especially some of these universities that are ranked a little outside the T14. So of course it'll still be more expensive than an Indian LLM, but the value add that you have of maybe you study at UCLA, you get an opportunity to do an internship at Netflix. Maybe suddenly you find yourself working in the legal team in Netflix for a year or so. That kind of experience all adds up. You write the bar exam. You really change as a professional in those 1 or 2 years. Of course, this is a best case scenario. You might be thinking, what if it doesn't happen? What if I go there, I don't do that? That you have to keep playing that best case, worst case. But it might be better than doing an Indian LLM. However, yeah, finances and family preferences and all of those things also do matter. So I don't want to comment or diminish somebody's Indian LLM, but I just feel like when you go outside, it's more of a value add, because your mind changes, you get more opportunities, and it's better in that sense. But maybe you can do that assessment for yourself to see which end of the spectrum you're at. So scholarships at Cambridge. So I just know a few, some are like based on the region that you come from, or some are based on the specialty that you want to pursue, like intellectual property and all. And are the SOPs different for, no, you would just have like a standard SOP for like the LLM at Cambridge. And then for the different colleges, I think that's something that you might want to ask somebody who studied actually in the UK. My understanding is that once you get admission, then you decide on where you want to go and where you want to choose. But I'm not, since I didn't study in the UK, I don't want to say that I'm like some expert. And so I I think maybe it's best to reach out to someone who is actually who is familiar with this different college system, because then they'll be able to guide you better. So yeah, could you talk about managing your classes and doing internships? Yeah, so I used to, I used to spend a lot of time in the library, because if I went back to the room, I felt I would just sleep, and I most inevitably I did. So it was much easier to go to a library and focus for some time. And I had a very supportive roommate as well. So we both would go, two of us, we would go with a pillow and a coffee, like a kettle, and we had like a full, in the winters we had a heater also. We would scare people away because they would think that we would study a lot, whereas actually we would just study for a few hours, and maybe we'd be talking or chatting or doing something. So yeah, we used the library as a way to get our stuff done. In terms of managing internships, yes, we had 2 months of a winter break, or like 2 months in the summer, so it was helpful to do internships that way. I didn't really do any internships while I was in the program. Like, some people, they do internships even beyond these breaks while they are with their academic commitments, because since I was in the 3-year course, and things are a little shorter that way, you have to finish a lot of stuff in terms of the BCI requirements. Never quite had the luxury to give up any of that and also do an internship. But if you have that flexibility, you can definitely pursue that. And sometimes it's easy to have these, now there are these softwares that allow you to, like, there's a software which allows you to focus for 25 minutes and you actually grow a tree in, I think it's called Forest, the app. So you can use something like that, because if you open your phone and you open like Instagram or something, the tree dies. So you can use that as a way to focus, and maybe listen to music, and go to whatever library, or maybe once the corona pandemic is a little is over, you can go to a coffee shop, or even there are multiple ways to do this. So you're interested in pursuing a career in human rights or international law. Yeah, so with international law and human rights, typically, the best way to do a start in a career is probably start off with an internship somewhere, because if you can get that internship experience, you will at least find out that, do I really want to do this? Because sometimes, you might be interested in international law, human rights, but when you actually get there, you're like, okay, maybe this is not what I want to do. So definitely do explore that internship option out, and then you can leverage that in your LLM applications, and also in your in your CV, in terms of like where you'd like to go. So yeah, 50% scholarship. Once again, okay, how can someone be guaranteed? See, there's no way to guarantee 100% scholarship. uh, you just have to apply, and you have to just pray and cross your fingers that yes, the university will give you money, and they'll be impressed with your application. If anybody is there out there who is guaranteeing you a scholarship for LLM, that's fishy. Don't fall for that. You need to because unless they own the university themselves, it's not going to be possible to guarantee you any kind of money. It's just that you have to apply and you have to take your chances. So, all right, could you guide about LLM and career prospects in Singapore? Yeah, Singapore, typically people do go, like NUS is the most popular one. And sometimes they are able to figure out a way to also do like an internship, and potentially convert that to like a great opportunity. But some of them, they just do that wonderful LLM, and then they come and they work at a top law firm in India. So both options are there. So it's not entirely out of this thing. You can, even if you're able to work for an international firm for some time in Singapore, you can transfer to some other market. Like I've seen that with one of my very good friends from the NYU LLM program. Like she got an opportunity in Singapore, and then converted it to a position in London, then converted that London position to a position back in New York. So it was like crazy, just went from one place to another all the way. So try to get into the network of these international firms if you can, because then it'll be easy for you to kind of move around and be attached to that firm. Good LLM options in Germany. Bucerius is very good. I did a summer school at EBS, which is in a very nice some like small town called Wiesbaden, which is about 40 minutes from Frankfurt. So if you like that kind of rural bucolic setting, you could probably look at that as well. So internships for doing LLM abroad, I think I've spoken a little about this. Just try to find the interest area that you have, and so if like you are interested in corporate law, then try to work at some of the top law firms in India, the Amarchands, the AZBs of the world. And then you can figure out, okay, if this is really what I want to do. If you want to do litigation, then make, by all means, work under people who are actually practicing at the high court, so that you can leverage that in your SOP and say that I really want to understand, like I want to go to the UK and understand how civil procedure or court practice works, and then that'll be very helpful to my future plans. We have another question about criminal law as a specification for LLM in UK universities. Yeah, it's pretty, I mean, it's just like any other area. You definitely, the only challenge perhaps would be that if you come with UK criminal law experience, hopefully that's helpful for you in your future practice, which I'm guessing would be in India. So just make sure you do that analysis yourself, that, okay, I'll be spending all this money and all this time. But hopefully this understanding will be helpful, because some of the laws in India are similar to the laws in the UK, that kind of thing. So that should, that should be the analysis that you do. So can I practice as a criminal lawyer directly after LLB? I don't think so, because you would need to actually license yourself there, or you'll have to pursue the LPC or do the QLTS and become a lawyer, so that at least you're able to advise directly. So I don't think you can. So definitely explore either the QLTS, LPC, or later the SQE option, because the SQE is also coming out. So try to see on how that's going to work. LLM from Japan, that's interesting. I'll be honest with you, I have never really had a query regarding that. I actually don't know LLM from Japan. If you could enlighten me, that would be really good. That would be great. But that's really cool. I would just think that maybe there might be some language related concerns there, because if it's all in Japanese, unless you're Japanese or you're planning to learn it, so definitely do look at that. Are IPR courses offered by WIPO? Yes, they are. And because it's an industry specific body, it will be pretty, it'll be helpful for you to do that. So what else we've got? Okay, some universities put Masters of Law in category of social science. Is that also LLM? Yeah, if it says Master of Law, it is an LLM. It has to be. If you're unsure, you can just reach out to the university and ask, like, what is the designation that people get after they graduate, in a sense. So if they confirm that yes, you will get the LLM, then for sure it is this thing. Suggest extracurricular activities which can upgrade a CV. Research, writing, if you're, because the LLM is an academic degree at the end of the day. So anything in that space is very good. If you were part of some moot, that would be great. Definitely have publications. That's very important, especially at some of the top programs they look at. So if you're in your final year or you're in your penultimate year and you don't have a single publication, it might be a good idea to start working on some of those, so that at least, even if it's a domestic publication for now, because some of the international ones, they have a longer publication window. So with the domestic ones, at least you can get a few. Sometimes you can even convert some research papers that you might have written for a class, and maybe you wrote it like a year ago, and you can just update some of the sources and push it out for publication. Whether it gets accepted or not is a different question, but at least you'll be able to get that publication done. So, okay, how can I know that the particular degree is equivalent to the LLM? Because the website that you mentioned only master in law. So how can I know that the particular degree will be recognized in India? See, if you're coming from like a good university, which is sort of ranked in the top 20 or top 30 of the law schools in that country, UK, US, or otherwise, you shouldn't have any issues in terms of recognition. In any case, in India, after you finish your law degree, you are eligible to, write the bar exam, the All India bar exam. So in a sense, you don't need the LLM from a recognition perspective, because on the basis of um, your scores in the All India exam, and you're getting that preliminary enrollment, you get the certificate of practice anyway. So recognition or no recognition is not an issue, as long as the brand name is there. You'll be fine. People. So like if you're coming from a UCLA or UPenn or NYU or any good university in the UK, it's fine, because you don't have to actually take that degree, go to a bar council, get a stamp, and say it's valid. So it shouldn't be an issue for you, because you will be able to practice as it is, right? So, okay, please guide about the bar exams in various countries like JD. So bar exams, like with respect to the US, I gave the New York bar exam. Pretty difficult, not that easy, but not impossible to do, because there are like prep courses and companies, and there are like people available willing to teach you and help you sort of qualify. So typically the way it works is you become so after you finish your LLM, you have like a 2-month window where you will study for the exam, you'll prepare for it, you'll wake up in the morning, attend some classes, then sit down to do like practice questions. So pretty mechanical. After you finish your LLM, you're parting for like a week or so, and then after that you have to go back to the same library which you thought you were done with, but now you have to actually go back and be like, okay, now I have to find a way or motivate myself to study. So I think it's easy in a sense, because everyone around you is studying and everyone around you is motivating you. But it's also difficult because typically as a foreign qualified lawyer, you are studying concepts and topics that people have had a year or so, or at least 2 years to absorb. But if you work hard, just like anything else, you can clear it. I think the only advice I can give is you have to study smart, and you have to make sure that a lot of your time is not being wasted in just watching the videos, but you're actually also practicing the questions, because those questions are actually what will be assessed when you are finally in those those 2 days that you have. It's kind of like a mini test match. You go in the morning, you have a lunch session, and then you have another afternoon session, and then you go back the next day, you have another morning session, and then followed by a break, and then another afternoon session. So it's like 12 yeah, it's like 6 hours on one day, 6 hours, so it's like 12 hours total over a period of 2 days. It can be exhausting, but yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. I think with the last question, um please do reach out to me personally, and we'll have a chat about that. So I think we're done at 1 hour, so I hopefully I've answered everything else. And yeah, thank you, Nikhil, for giving me this opportunity, and hope it was helpful for all of you. I will also, oh, okay, the chat has been disabled. So yeah, you can go to www dot okay, I was just going to type out my email address, so you can reach out to me, or you can also, I think I'll put it anyway, if you want to. So if you have any other questions, or you just want to have a chat, you can reach out through any of these mediums to me. All right. Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir. On the behalf of all the students and attendees, I would like to thank you, sir, for giving your valuable time to us.
Yeah,
And we
thank
are
you so much.
really extremely grateful of you for spending an evening with us. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for joining us, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for joining us, and thank you.